The night was colder than death. Snow fell endlessly from a dark sky, turning the world white and silent. The wind howled like a beast, cutting through skin and bone. Each step left a shallow print in the frozen ground before the storm swallowed it again. She moved slowly, her arms tight around the small bundle she carried. Inside the bundle was her baby, weak and quiet. The baby's breathing was thin, almost gone. His tiny face was pale, his lips turning blue. The mother looked down, her heart breaking. She whispered softly, "Stay with me, please stay." Her own body trembled, not just from the cold but from fear. She knew the truth. The baby would not survive the night. Not in this storm, not in this wasteland of endless snow. Her people had left her, pushed away with cruel words. They said she was cursed. They said her child was a burden. They told her to walk into the storm and not return, and so she walked with no place to go, no hope to hold. The snow pressed against her face, sharp as glass. Her legs felt heavy, each step weaker than the last. She wanted to fall, to let the storm bury her. But when she looked at her child, she found one more step inside her, one more breath, one more moment. The love for her baby kept her moving, even as the night tried to kill them both. Time passed slowly, or maybe too fast. Her mind blurred between past and present. She remembered when the child was born. She remembered the hope in her heart, but now that hope was breaking. The baby gave a weak cry, a sound too soft for the storm. She pressed in closer, tears freezing on her cheeks. "This is not your fault," she whispered. "I am sorry." Suddenly, she stopped. Through the wall of white, a shape appeared. At first she thought it was another storm trick. The snow often formed shadows that moved and twisted. But this shadow was taller, solid, walking toward her. Her heart pounded. She pulled the baby closer and stepped back. The shadow grew clearer. It was a figure, wrapped in heavy gear, strange and strong. Not one of her people, not one of the hunters, something different. The figure moved with purpose, steady in the storm. He carried something in his hands, and light glowed faintly from his chest. The mother felt fear, but also a small spark of hope. Her people had told her humans were weak. They said humans were nothing but lost wanderers. But here, in the snow, stood a human, alive when no one else could be. The man stopped a few steps away. He looked at her, then at the bundle in her arms. His voice cut through the storm. Deep and calm, "Your child," he said, "is still alive." She froze, unable to answer. How could he know? How could he see through the storm, through her fear? But his eyes were steady, not cruel like her people, not empty like the hunters. There was something else in him, something she had never seen before. Her lips trembled. "He will not survive the night," she whispered. The man shook his head slowly. "Not tonight," he said firmly. She stared at him, unsure if this was madness or miracle. The storm howled, but his voice carried like fire in the cold. For the first time in hours, maybe days, she felt warmth, not in her body, but in her heart still. Fear pressed against her chest. Who was he? Why was he here? The snow fell harder, covering the world in silence again. But she could not look away from the stranger, and deep inside, a thought grew. Maybe the night would not take her child after all. The storm raged around them, but the frozen night had changed, because a human had appeared in the snow, and with him came something stronger than fear. Hope. The figure stood tall in the storm, wrapped in thick clothing that looked built for war against the cold. His mask was half covered with frost, but his eyes glowed with a strange light, steady, unshaken by the blizzard. The mother stared, clutching her baby tight, her breath uneven. Her heart wanted to trust, but her mind screamed danger. Her people always said humans were weak, unwanted outsiders. So why did this one walk calmly through a storm that could kill even the strongest of her kind? The stranger lowered the pack from his shoulder and knelt in the snow. The storm swirled around them, yet he moved as if the cold could not touch him. "Let me see the child," he said, his voice deep calm. The mother stepped back, shaking her head. "No. You cannot," she whispered. "You do not know. He will not survive." But the man only looked at her, his gaze steady like stone. "I do know," he answered, "because I have seen worse." His words cut through her fear, but doubt still gripped her. She looked down at her baby. The child's breathing was thin, fading. Every second mattered. She had no fire, no food, no shelter. If she refused this stranger, her child would die in her arms. Her arms trembled, her tears freezing as they fell. Slowly, unwillingly, she loosened the blanket just enough to show the child's pale face. The man leaned closer, his breath forming clouds in the air. He touched the baby's tiny wrist, 2 fingers checking for life. His gloves were thick, but his hands were steady, practiced. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "Still alive." The mother's lips parted. Shocked, the man's eyes softened. "He is weak, but the night has not claimed him yet." From his pack, the human pulled out strange objects, small glowing stones, silver packets, tools she did not know. He tore one packet open, pressed it between his palms, and heat spread like magic. He slid the warm pack against the baby's chest, wrapping him tight again. The child stirred weakly, letting out a faint sound. The mother gasped, covering her mouth. Her people had left her to die, but this stranger, this human, was saving her child. She whispered, Why are you helping me?" The man looked at her with eyes that carried both weariness and fire. "Because no child deserves to die in the snow," he said simply. His words carried weight, as if they were carved from stone. Not pity, not arrogance, only truth. She trembled, her thoughts clashing. Her people told her humans were nothing, but here stood one who defied the storm itself. The fire pack glowed softly, casting light in the frozen dark. The human began building a small fire with quick, practiced movements. He used no wood, only strange rods that sparked when struck. Soon, flames rose, orange and alive, pushing back. The endless white. The warmth reached her skin, reached her child. The baby's breath grew deeper. Steadier, she stared in disbelief, whispering, "It cannot be. It cannot." The man sat near the fire, his face shadowed by the glow. He spoke without looking at her. "You were cast out," he said, as if he already knew. She flinched, holding her baby close. "They said I was cursed. They said my child was a burden," she admitted, voice cracking. The man nodded slowly. "They were wrong," he said. "Sometimes the weak are only waiting to grow strong." The storm roared around them, but inside the circle of fire, it felt like another world. Safe, if only for a moment. She studied him closely. His clothing was strange, made of layers unknown to her people. His tools glowed with hidden power, but it was not his gear that unsettled her most. It was his presence. There was something unshakable about him, something her people never had. "Who are you?" she asked softly. The man raised his eyes, meeting hers. "I am a human," he said. "That is enough." The words were simple, but they carried weight like thunder. For the first time, she felt that maybe the stories of humans her people told, the mocking tales of weakness, were lies. Maybe the truth was something her people feared, something standing right in front of her, keeping her child alive in the storm. She sat in silence, staring into the fire. The baby shifted softly in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling stronger than before. Her heart ached with both relief and confusion. The night was still deadly, the storm still waiting, but something had changed, because a stranger had appeared in the snow, and he was human. The fire burned low, its glow small against the endless storm. Yet to her, it felt like a miracle, for the first time since she had been cast out. There was warmth. The mother held her baby close, his skin less cold, his breath stronger. She watched the stranger work with steady hands, feeding the fire with strange rods that burned without wood. He moved with calm, as if this storm was nothing new to him. She whispered softly, "How do you do this? How do you make fire so quickly?" The man did not look at her, his eyes fixed on the flames. "Humans," he said, "learn to survive in places where no one else can." His voice was low, certain. The words made her shiver, not from cold, but from something she could not name. She thought of her people, how they had abandoned her. They called humans weak, foolish, but this one seemed stronger than all of them. The wind screamed outside their circle of light. The storm pressed hard, like claws scratching at their fragile safety. The mother looked into the white darkness, fear crawling in her chest. What if the night takes him anyway? She asked, her voice trembling. The man finally looked at her, his eyes sharp but warm. "Not tonight," he said again. The same words as before. It was not just hope, it sounded like a promise, and she wanted to believe. The baby let out a faint cry, weak but alive. The sound filled her heart with both pain and joy. She pressed her lips to the child's forehead, whispering thanks. When she looked up again, the human was unpacking more of his strange things. He pulled out a flask, poured warm liquid into a small cup. "Give this to him," he said. She hesitated, looking at the strange drink. "What is it?" she asked. "Life," he answered, short and firm. His words struck her like fire, mysterious, but full of certainty. She touched the cup to the baby's lips, letting a few drops fall. At first, the child was still, but then he swallowed, a tiny sound escaping his throat. She gasped, her eyes wide. The man nodded once, as if he had expected nothing less. "You see," he said quietly, "he is stronger than you think." Her heart ached with relief, and yet with confusion. Who was this man? Why was he here in this cursed place? The flames crackled, pushing back the cold, but outside their small world of light, shadows moved. She stiffened, clutching her baby tighter. Her eyes darted to the edges of the firelight. Shapes flickered in the snow, too large to be tricks of the storm. The man noticed too, his hand sliding calmly to the weapon strapped to his side. It was not like the weapons of her people. It looked old, simple, yet dangerous. He did not panic, he only said, "They are watching." Her breath caught. "What is watching us?" she whispered. The man's gaze stayed on the snow, sharp as steel. "Hunters," he said softly. Drawn by weakness, by blood, by fear. Her heart pounded. She remembered the cruel words of her people, how they had cast her out as bait. They had hoped the hunters would follow her and leave them safe. Tears burned her eyes. She had been nothing more than sacrifice to them. And now the danger was here. The baby whimpered softly, sensing the fear around him. The man turned his eyes back to her, his voice steady. "Do not fear," he said. "I will not let them take you." She wanted to believe him, but doubt filled her. How could one man fight what the hunters were? Her people feared them more than death itself. And yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw no fear at all. The fire snapped, sparks dancing into the air. The snow swirled harder, and in its white curtain, glowing eyes appeared. One pair, then two, then many, circling, waiting. The mother gasped, clutching her baby so tightly that he stirred in protest. The man rose to his feet, calm and firm. He stood tall, his weapon ready. His shadow stretched across the snow by the firelight. "Stay behind me," he told her, his tone leaving no space for argument. Her lips trembled, but she obeyed. For some reason, she trusted him more than she trusted anyone else. The hunters growled in the dark, their forms still hidden. The man did not move back, did not tremble. He planted his feet in the snow and faced them head on. The mother held her breath, waiting for death to fall upon them. But the human's voice broke the silence, strong, steady, unshaken. "This fire is not yours," he said into the night. "This child is not yours." His words carried weight. Like thunder through the storm, the hunters growled louder, circling closer, but the fire burned and the man stood firm. For the first time in her life, the mother felt something she had never felt before. Not fear, not despair, but hope, born from the fire in the snow and from the human who guarded it. *, the fire's glow fought against the storm. but it could not push back the eyes watching from the darkness. They glowed like tiny embers, circling, moving with hunger, the mother's arms tightened around her baby, her heart beating so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She had heard stories of these creatures since childhood. They were called night stalkers, hunters that followed the scent of weakness through snow and blood. Few ever lived to tell of them, and now she was the bait. The man stood tall. His shadow stretched long by the fire. His weapon rested calmly in his hands. Old and strange but steady, the hunters growled, low and deep, the sound rumbling through the frozen air. The mother whispered, "We must run. They will kill us." The man shook his head, his eyes never leaving the shadows. "Running is death," he said firmly. "Standing is life." The words struck her like a blade. Her people would never have said such a thing. They would have fled. They would have abandoned the weak. But this man, this human, chose to face the darkness. Her fear shook her bones. But something about his calm steadiness rooted her to the ground. The first hunter stepped into the edge of the firelight. Its body was long and thin, built of shadows and fur. Its jaws stretched wide, rows of teeth glistening with ice. Its glowing eyes locked on the baby in her arms. The mother gasped, pressing the child close. The creature hissed, a sound that made her blood freeze, but the man did not flinch. He lifted his weapon, his voice quiet but firm. "You will not take them." The hunter crouched, muscles tensing. Then it leapt, a blur of black against the snow. The mother screamed, clutching her baby. The man moved faster than she thought possible. The weapon roared with a sharp crack. Fire bursting from its mouth. The sound echoed like thunder across the frozen wasteland. The hunter fell mid-air, crashing into the snow with a shriek. Its body twisted once, then stilled. The mother's breath caught, her eyes wide. She had never seen such power, not from her people, not from anyone. But there was no time to breathe. More shapes moved, more glowing eyes closing in. The firelight flickered against their bodies. 5, maybe 6, maybe more. Her heart pounded, her mind screaming that they could not survive this. Yet the man's voice carried through the storm, calm as ever. "Stay low, keep the child safe," he said. She sank to her knees behind him, trembling, her tears freezing against her cheeks. The hunters circled, moving faster, their growls rising. Then they struck together, shadows flying at the fire. The man fired again, the weapon roaring. One hunter spun to the ground, another leapt past him, claws reaching for her. She screamed, pulling her baby close. But the man was already there, his body blocking her. His arm swung, striking the beast with a heavy blow from the weapon's stock. The creature yelped, falling back into the snow. The fire spat sparks, smoke rising into the night. The storm raged, the world a blur of white. Black and flame, the man moved through it like iron, every strike, every shot precise. The hunters hissed and snapped, but they could not break through. The mother watched, her fear fighting with awe. She had believed the stories of humans, that they were weak, soft, unwanted. But this man was not weak. He was a storm within the storm. Unyielding, another hunter lunged, teeth wide. The man dropped to one knee, driving his blade into its chest. The creature shrieked, twisting, before it fell silent in the snow. The smell of blood filled the air, sharp and bitter. The mother's hands shook, her baby crying softly in her arms. But her eyes stayed fixed on him. Every movement, every strike, carried something she had never seen before. Not just strength, but will. The hunters hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering with doubt. They paced at the edge of the firelight, growling, but no longer rushing forward. The man stood tall, his weapon heavy but steady. His breath was hard, but his eyes burned. With fire he pointed the weapon at the dark, his voice sharp. "Go back," he said. "The night will not feed on us." The creatures hissed, snapping their jaws. But then, slowly, they began to retreat, step by step, fading into the storm, their eyes vanishing one by one. Silence fell. broken only by the crackle of fire and the soft cry of the baby. The mother gasped for air, her whole body shaking. Her people would never believe this. One man standing against the hunters and living. She looked up at him, her voice breaking. You fought them. You saved us." The man lowered his weapon, his shoulders heavy but steady, his eyes turned to her, quiet and serious. "This is what humans do," he said. "Survive." She stared at him, her heart full of confusion, fear, and something else, something new. In the firelight, the snow melted into steam around his feet. The night was still deadly, the cold still sharp. But the hunters had been driven back, and for the first time, she believed her baby might live to see the morning. The storm grew louder, but after the clash, there was a strange silence inside the fire's circle. The bodies of fallen hunters lay in the snow, their dark fur stained with blood that steamed against the cold. The mother clutched her baby, rocking him gently as if to shield his small heart from the horror. The child cried weakly, but he was alive, and that alone felt like a miracle. The man stood still, his weapon heavy in his hands. Snow gathered on his shoulders, but he did not move. His eyes stayed on the darkness beyond the fire. He knew it was not over. The hunters never gave up so easily. They would wait, they would circle, they would strike again. The mother whispered shakily, "They are gone?" The man shook his head. "No," he said simply. "They are testing us." His words chilled her more than the storm. She glanced at the dead beasts, their sharp teeth glistening in the firelight. If those were only a test, then what was coming? The wind howled, carrying a sound that froze her blood. A howl answered by others. Not close, but not far. The hunters were calling to their pack. She gasped, her tears stinging. "There will be more." The man finally looked at her, his face shadowed but calm. "Yes," he said. "There will." He knelt by the fire, adding another strange rod to keep it alive. Flames rose higher, warming the fragile circle of survival. The baby stirred, his cheeks no longer as pale. The sight gave her strength, but fear still pressed heavy. How can one man fight them all? She asked in despair. The human's gaze locked with hers, steady and strong. "One man can be enough," he said, "if he refuses to fall." Before she could answer, the snow moved. Shadows flickered between the storm's white walls. More eyes appeared, glowing like sparks in the night. 10, maybe 12, their numbers growing. The mother's breath caught. Her people had always said no one survived when the pack came, but the man only rose, his weapon ready. His breath fogged the air, but his stance did not waver. The hunters closed in, their growls deep, their teeth bared. Then, with a sudden shriek, they attacked. The fire cracked, sparks flying. The human moved like a storm inside the storm. His weapon roared, fire bursting with each strike. One hunter fell. Another twisted back with a cry, but more came, leaping from every side. The mother pressed to the ground, shielding her baby with her body, her eyes wide as she watched him fight. A beast lunged for his throat, jaws wide. The man swung his arm, smashing the weapon's butt into its skull. It fell, dazed, before his blade cut deep. Blood splattered across the snow. Another hunter charged from the side, claws flashing. He dropped to one knee, rolling through the snow before firing again. The creature shrieked and collapsed. Every movement was sharp, practiced as though he had fought storms and beasts all his life. But the hunters kept coming, their numbers endless. They circled, snapping jaws, their cries echoing in the night. The storm carried their shadows like ghosts. The mother cried out, "You cannot stop them." The man's voice broke through the chaos, strong and unshaken. "Watch me," he said. Another wave struck, claws tearing at his coat. He fought back with fire, steel, and will. The snow turned red around him, steam rising where hot blood met. Frozen ground, the beasts snarled and screamed, but he would not fall. The mother's fear shifted into something else. Awe. Every strike, every roar of his weapon was not just strength, it was defiance, it was survival. The hunters hesitated again, their bodies low. They paced at the edge of the firelight. Watching him, the man stood, chest heaving, blood dripping from his blade. His eyes burned like the chew. Fire itself. The storm howled around them, but inside the circle there was silence, a silence carved by battle, by the will of one man. The mother looked at him, her lips trembling. You are not like the others, she whispered. Her people would have run, would have abandoned her. But this human fought for a child that was not his, for a woman he did not know. And he did not stop, he simply stood, ready for more. The hunters growled, uncertain. They circled wider now, their glowing eyes fading back into the snow. They were not beaten, not yet, but they feared him, for the first time. The night stalkers feared. The fire burned, casting light on the blood-stained snow. The baby slept again in her arms, breathing slow and steady, and she realized the truth. The night had brought hunters, death and despair, but it had also brought something greater, a human who would not break. The snow was quiet again. Though the storm still raged in the distance, the fire burned low, its glow soft against the blood-stained ground. The hunters had vanished back into the white, their glowing eyes gone, but the silence was heavy, filled with the memory of battle. The man wiped his blade on the snow, his breath steady though his body carried wounds, small cuts along his arms, claw marks on his coat, but he did not seem to feel pain. The mother sat close to the fire, holding her baby tight. Her eyes never left him, her mind unable to grasp what she had seen. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "You should be dead. No one survives them." The man crouched by the flames, his shadow flickering against the snow. "I am human," he said simply, as if that explained everything. But to her, it explained nothing. Her people mocked humans, called them weak, unwanted, cursed, yet here stood one who had faced death and did not fall. She lowered her gaze to her baby, whose tiny chest now rose and fell with steadier rhythm. Tears filled her eyes. "You saved him," she said, her voice breaking. "You saved us both." The man looked at the child, his eyes softer now. "No child should be left to die in the cold," he said. His words carried weight, as though they came from something deeper, something old. She studied his face, the lines of hardship, the fire in his eyes. There was something unspoken in him, something carved by battles long before this night. "What drives you?" she asked, trembling. "Why fight for those who are not your own?" The man was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Then he spoke, his voice low, almost like a memory. "Where I come from, we learned to stand for each other," he said. "On Earth, our world, storms, hunger, war, they came for us, again and again." He paused, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "But humans refused to let the weak be taken." His words cut through her like a blade. Her people abandoned her, left her as sacrifice. But this man spoke of a legacy where the weak were protected, where even in despair, they stood together. He continued, his voice steady. "Long before I walked here, there were humans who carried fire through endless nights. They kept children warm when there was no hope. They fought beasts with bare hands when no weapons remained. They did not do it for reward. They did it because survival is not enough. It must be survival with meaning." The mother's lips trembled. His words were unlike anything she had ever heard. Her people believed in strength only, in casting out the weak, but this man believed in something else, something stronger. Her eyes burned with tears. "Why me?" she asked. "Why save a stranger? Why save my child?" The man's gaze turned to her, sharp but kind. "Because one life matters," he said. "Your child matters." He leaned closer, his voice like a vow. "If he lives, then maybe tomorrow will be different." The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the storm. She held her baby tighter, her heart breaking with gratitude and confusion. No one from her people had spoken such words. No one had ever stood for her like this. Only this human who had appeared in the snow. Silence lingered between them, broken only by the howl of the wind. The mother finally whispered, "My people always said humans were weak." The man gave a faint, tired smile. "They say that because they do not understand," he answered. "We are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest." He placed his hand against the fire, his eyes steady. "But when the night comes, we endure." His words filled her chest with something new, not just hope, but respect. She looked at her baby, alive in her arms, and knew this truth was greater than any tale her people told. The storm outside began to ease, the wind less violent. The firelight seemed brighter. The man leaned back, staring at the sky hidden behind clouds. "Your people left you to die," he said quietly. "They will answer for that one day." The mother said nothing, only pressed her lips to her child's head. She knew he was right. The baby stirred, letting out a small cry. The man looked at the child again. His voice softened, almost gentle. "He is the future," he said. "Tonight, the future will not be taken." The mother's heart swelled with something she had never felt before. Not only relief, not only gratitude, but a sense of witnessing something greater. She had seen death in the snow, but she had also seen humanity revealed, and it was stronger than fear, stronger than night. The storm was breaking. The endless roar of wind grew softer, and the snow began to fall more gently. For the first time in many hours, the sky above showed a faint gray light. Dawn was coming. The mother sat close to the dying fire, her baby wrapped in the human's strange warm cloth. The child's face no longer pale, his tiny breath stronger, steady. She wept quietly, stroking the boy's hair, her heart full of both relief and disbelief. He had survived the night, something she thought impossible only hours ago. The man stood at the edge of the firelight, scanning the snow. His weapon rested at his side, his posture calm but alert. He did not rest, even now, as if he was made to keep watch while others slept. The mother looked at him, her lips trembling with words she had no strength to speak. Finally she whispered, "If you had not come, he would be gone." The man turned his head slightly, his eyes soft. "That is why I came," he said. She blinked, surprised. "You knew?" she asked. He shook his head. "I did not know," he said quietly. "I only walked where the storm called me, and found you." His words sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if fate itself had brought him. The gray light spread slowly across the sky. The storm faded into silence, leaving only the crunch of snow beneath their feet. The man bent down, adding the last of his fire rods to keep the flames alive a little longer. "Day is safer," he said, "but not safe enough." The mother looked at him, confused. "Will the hunters return?" she asked. He nodded once. "They always return." Fear touched her heart. But when she looked at him, standing steady in the pale dawn, courage replaced it. She had seen him face death and not fall. She had seen him fight for her child as if the baby was his own blood. Her people had left her to die. But this man, this human, had given her more than survival. He had given her hope. She rose slowly, holding her child close, her legs weak but steady. The snow stretched out in every direction, endless and empty. She asked softly, "Where do we go?" The man looked at the horizon, his eyes distant. "Forward," he said, "always forward." His words echoed in her chest like truth carved into stone. She stepped closer to him, her voice breaking. "You are not like the others. You are more." The man's eyes met hers, calm and unshaken. "I am human," he said. "That is enough." The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft cry that carried into the quiet morning. The sound made her heart ache with joy. She kissed her child's forehead, whispering, "You will live, little one. You will live." Her tears fell onto his warm skin, tears of relief, tears of love. The man watched silently, his gaze unreadable, but deep in his eyes there was something pride, perhaps, or sorrow. He looked away, scanning the horizon again. "Your people abandoned you," he said quietly. "They feared weakness, but they did not see strength and love." The mother lowered her head, shame and pain in her chest. "They left us to die," she whispered. The man's voice grew firm. "Then you will live and prove them wrong." The words struck her like fire. She realized then that his fight, his will, was not only for survival, it was for something greater. Humans fought not because they had to, but because they chose to. And that choice made them more powerful than any beast, any storm, any cruelty. The sun began to rise, a faint golden light spilling across the snow. The world no longer felt endless and cold. It felt alive, filled with possibility. The mother held her child high for a moment, showing him to the dawn. The baby blinked, tiny eyes reflecting the light. She smiled through her tears, whispering, "You will see the stars one day, little one." The man adjusted his pack, his shadow long across the snow. It was time to move, time to leave the circle of fire behind. But before he stepped forward, he turned back to her. His voice was steady, but softer now. "Remember this night," he said. "Not because of the fear, not because of the blood." He paused, his eyes sharp as steel and warm as flame. "Remember it because humanity stood with you." Her chest tightened, her throat aching with unspoken words. She wanted to thank him, to beg him not to leave, but she understood. He was not a man who belonged to one place. He was a flame carried through the dark, meant to walk where the night was strongest. The three of them, woman, child, and human, began walking into the dawn. The snow crunched beneath their feet. Behind them, the fire burned low and finally died. But ahead, the sky was full of light, and though the mother did not yet know what path lay before them, she knew one truth with all her heart. Her child would live, because on the coldest night, in the cruelest storm, a stranger appeared in the snow, a human, and he changed everything. Asterisk.